Well, I guess the starting point is there's been a lot of chat about Jack Nowell. He's got a hearing this evening. Just give us your latest take on it all, and what do you think it is?
Well, obviously I've got to be a little careful because of the hearing still to come. But I think it's clear, and and I obviously discussed things with Jack, and I think everyone who knows Jack knows it's not been directed at 𝗕𝗥𝗚𝗚𝗚, and I think everyone who knows him, the whole refereeing department, will all know Jack. I mean, he'll have captained games with a lot of them working. He's never had a district referee. I think he's one of probably the least penalised players probably in the Premiership for the amount of games he's played. Certainly one of the least carded. Never had any issue with dissent in any way, on off the field. His message is a frustration at the game. It's a frustration at the game, probably how we got in that circumstance, and then it's a frustration at the game as how does something so technically small in a lot of ways become a second yellow card that becomes a red card. Now, he shouldn't have done it in the way he should. He's mentioned a decision which maybe he shouldn't have done. I've said to all the guys, and they're aware of this, you just better making no comment on game decisions, because it's a very fine line on what you have to do. That said, it doesn't mean it's not something that's worth debating, because I think I got the impression even yesterday, Monday, talking to Paul Hull, that they actually, him and European Rugby, World Rugby, actually probably wanted to look into the circumstance, although technically correct, wanted to look into the circumstances of it, because it actually looks and feels a bit awkward. Is that the intention of the laws for that to happen? Now, although it is technically correct. So I think these things are worth debating, because they're worth debating because I think people don't want to see that becoming a card today, because he's actually only doing what naturally a rugby player should do, is scrambling like mad to try and prevent a try being scored. And it's the whole circumstance of that scenario, being in the corner, is a try scored or not, who's having the momentum, is a player going to ground, that creates all the view around it. There are hundreds of tackles happen in games where a player is part of something but they're on the ground, and it just kind of, there's a flow of the game, and so it doesn't get looked at. And I think that's why all these things, they're worth debating. Jack's just gone about it in the wrong way, and obviously it's a lesson learned for him. But it's 100% he's not done it in any other way than a frustration of the circumstance there. Now, for me, my frustration in the circumstance is, how did we get there? How do we get in a scenario where Ollie Woodward's on a yellow card, and then how did he get in a circumstance where he's scrambling to have to make an assist in a cover tackle in the corner? That's my job to deal with, and we've looked at all those. We've actually looked at from the beginning of the period that led to both our yellow cards, as to how did it happen and how could we have avoided things. And in all of them, there's 4 or 5 or 6 sometimes things that we got wrong or didn't do right that led to those cards and led to the pressure points that created them. That's all I've got to look at. But obviously Jack's are very aware that he's just got to react in the right way as well.
Well, you talked about framework is that they have to follow, but laws being tinkered with all the time. Even the game now is struggling to keep up with it. Players, coaches, referees, you're all having that, what do I do?
Yeah. Well, I think again it shows one of those circumstances that rugby keeps getting itself into. When, I mean, the amount of different messages I had, the amount of different things being said about that decision, because nobody really knew, and yet most people's reaction to it was, really, this should really end up being a red card? Whatever the circumstances, Ollie would have been on a yellow or whatever. And so that probably shows you that, are we getting things right as a game? I've said this plenty of times. We're a difficult game for a new supporter to understand. Because the rules are relatively complex and the laws are relatively complex, but we do tinker with them an awful lot. I think there's even talk about variations and tinkering going on now. And I think we've got to, at some stage, we've got to just let the game settle down. That's slightly different to this circumstance that happened with Ollie. I think Ollie, it's an incredible set of circumstances that lead to that decision. And it is, generally that has to be like that. But I do think that it's not the intention of the laws to yellow card somebody doing something a non-dangerous, and B very kind of a technically type scenario, just because the outcome is different, because the try doesn't get scored. And I think it's probably something that, like I say, refereeing departments, I think they're going to look at it, especially before a tournament like World Cup, because you want the decisions to look correct and equitable for both teams, attack and defence, don't you?